Welcome to DABEL Tech Talk. This is my second pilot episode. My name is Dale Bondanza, and my company is DAB Enterprises, LLC. My company offers virtual, that is virtual, fractional, or interim CIO level consulting and services to help your company get to that next level, despite those forces set against you. We do that through a passionate focus on people, process, and technology. In that order, don't get it wrong. For my second pilot episode today, I have a special guest with me, Grant McGaugh. Did I pronounce that correctly, Grant?
That is Grant McGaugh.
McGaugh. Thank you, Grant. I appreciate that. So as you can see, this is just my cover slide here with Grant. So today we're going to be talking about private cloud computing. So let me tell you a little bit about Grant. Grant is the president of Healthcare Services. He's been recognized by Legacy Magazine as a thought leader and a super connector for healthcare professionals. He's also the host of the Follow Your Brand podcast. So if you're watching my podcast today, please look up and subscribe to Grant's podcast as well. I am. His highlights include establishing a statewide organization for the National Association of Health Services Executives for Florida, and is also currently the program chair for the HIMSS South Florida. He has an upcoming partnership with the Alan Veen School at Nova Southeastern, which is right here in Davie, Florida, the Broward Center for Innovation. So I'm sure Grant will talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. So without any further ado, I'll let Grant also introduce himself in case I missed anything there, Grant. So thanks for joining me.
That was a wonderful introduction there, Dale. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate what you're doing with TechTalk. This is a great way to inform our community, inform others about what we do and the business problems that we solve.
Thank you. So today's topic, private cloud computing, and I know you obviously have a special tie to it with your own company as well. So at a high level, and I think most people that are listening to a technical podcast understand the difference between on-premise versus cloud, but specifically within cloud computing, when we talk about private cloud versus a public cloud. So can you define for me, what does that mean? What does private versus public mean when it comes to
I love it.
Computing?
Glad you brought that up. I'm the brand evangelist for Volatile Data Centers. We've been a data center here in South Florida for the last 20 plus years. And we are a boutique data center. And we pride ourselves in the fact that, first of all, we're very, very private. You would not even see us if you passed along the road down the street. You wouldn't even know we were there. But within the data center is a state-of-the-art Tier 4 data center to withstand a Category 5 hurricane. So why would I want to be in South Florida? Because we aren't going anywhere.
That was one of my questions. You kind of beat me to it. It's like, who sets up a data center in Florida when there's class 5 hurricanes?
That's it. And the thing about it, most of the time, if people don't realize, you lose power during a hurricane. It would take something very catastrophic to actually move a Tier 4 building. That means it's rated, and we are very, very rated. We have concrete that's 11 feet thick all the way around in our facility, so it's not going anywhere. And if it does, we got much greater problems than worrying about the data center, right? But it's completely backed up from a power standpoint. It's all about reliability, and it's about having the redundancy built into your data center to be able to withstand any type of forces of nature. And a lot of times what people don't realize when it comes to that disaster recovery, business continuity, it's not these big, giant episodes that happen. It's the everyday episodes that human beings cause. Most of the outages people experience are really human error that take place. So why would you want to utilize a volatile data center? Is a lot to do with that. If you have an on-premise data center, that means you're spending a lot of cycles. You're probably spending a lot of money to maintain that data center. And you're asking yourself, why am I doing that? And there's a number of different reasons. A lot of times it's legacy equipment. You've incurred some technical debt that you still can't get rid of, so you're maintaining it. You're not cloud ready. When I say cloud ready, I'm talking about public cloud. What is public cloud? That's your AWS, your Googles, your Azure. They're very good when you want to start out on the cloud journey. very easy to get into public cloud services, very good for R&D, very good for sandboxing, very good for SaaS type applications for delivery. Why would you utilize Volatile Data Center to answer your question specifically? Because you want more control. Once you want more control and you don't want the expense of running your own data center, you would then seek out Volatile Data Centers as a private data center. You can have infrastructure as a service, so you don't have to own your own equipment, or if you decide that if you want to own your own equipment, that's co-location. If you don't want to own your own equipment, that is private cloud or IaaS as a service. The cool factor is that you're in a data center that has its own network. We have all the connectivity that you're going to need to get into either whether it's private cloud or other connectivity that you need for your business worldwide that you would not have available in an on-premise data center.
So I assume that has everything that a tier 4 would have. So you probably have dual paths coming in from 2 different carriers, redundancy built in. You probably store stuff offsite as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we have all of those types of factors. So we've got facilities in Deerfield Beach, that's our main facility. We got facilities 2 in Miami, 1 in Atlanta, and another in Chicago. So we do backup replication all the way into Atlanta, depending on what the client really needs for redundancy and backup. And that's what again, why would you utilize a Volatile Data Center? The other key factors that we own our own dark fiber and network throughout the metro area in South Florida. This is good for healthcare facilities because I'm in healthcare primarily for what I do. Why is that important? Because you become a node off of your own network, right? And you don't have to traverse the public internet or the public services to get to a backup and data recovery service. And we're utilizing Ceph replication or Ceph storage in our facilities. If you're familiar with Ceph, that's CEPH. That's the same application that they use in Google, same application they use in AWS and Azure for when you need to scale at very large amounts of your data and your data storage. And I'll say this before I defer back to you. It's easy to get into public cloud storage, but not easy to get out, meaning when you need that data very quickly, how much is it going to cost you? Not only the cost, but then the expense and the time. How much time does it take to get the data back when it's all in your public cloud facility?
And that's probably the answer to the question that you made me think of something about a minute ago when you said, well, when people want more control over their environment, that's when they want to move to private versus public. So when you said, like, what are those controls? And maybe that was one of them. But maybe, what are some of those? Why would I want more control versus just saying, yeah, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, those are massive, those are huge. I'm sure I can trust them. But what can't I control that I could if I went with a more local private solution?
Well, absolutely. It's the infrastructure control.
Okay.
You do not control the infrastructure in public cloud. This is layer 2 and below. You have no control over that. You are at their mercy. So when it comes to SLA, service level agreements, well, just like with FPL, if the power goes out, you're just going to have to wait for them to turn it back on. Right. You don't have any control. Now, it's just, for instance, if you had your own generator, you can generate your own power, right? That type of thing. So at a co-location data center with private cloud, you have control. You can come to our data center. You can actually touch your servers. You can actually see the storage. You can start looking at your application layer. We also have IT managed services as well. So we can actually manage your infrastructure all the way down to the kernel and help you even at the app level. You cannot get that kind of support typically at your public cloud provider. So that's a big difference. So when you're talking healthcare, you're talking about regulations and compliance, and that you've got to maintain high-tech control or HIPAA compliance and that type of thing. That is a big thing when a lot of these larger institutions don't want to put everything into cloud because of that problem of control. I don't have the access layer. Whereas in our facility, you have control of access. And like I said, you can have the 3 layers. You can have the co-location control, You can have IaaS to that we're controlling your infrastructure, but you have direct access to us. We're a 24/7 managed service provider. We have our own SOC, we have our own NOC. So you're talking direct to us. Whereas then we can actually connect to public cloud. Again, you have SaaS applications that still need to traverse through public cloud, through the public internet. So you have all three flavors within a Volaco data center solution that you would not have strictly if you have on-prem only, or you have on-prem and you have a public data center, but you're not utilizing any kind of co-location or private cloud as a backup or as a primary resource.
Okay, you made me just think of something else that I didn't ask you this in the pre-question, so I apologize, but you made me just think of this. So am I as safe if I'm going to put my company's applications in your private cloud from a cybersecurity perspective? Am I just as safe there as I would be in an Azure or an AWS?
You're probably going to be more safe. And the reason why that's not just at the cybersecurity level, think about the physical security level.
Sure.
Like I said earlier, a lot of times it's human error or human control. Who has access to your data? You know, where is that access to your data? So you have a lot of physical controls in a Volaco data center as far as access, right? So whether it's through fingertip, right? It could be virtual, right? Or all the different ways. We have man traps throughout the facility. So the likelihood of someone getting into your cage, so to speak, or getting into your IaaS infrastructure is very, very low. And you have complete control over that. And there's cameras and that type of thing. Whereas in public cloud, again, it's open. So yes, they do have controls as well, but do you have access to that control? What is your availability to that control? So it becomes a less availability is what I would say. But then when you go under audit, when you have audits, you have compliance. What does that look like? What does your cloud migration strategy look like? What does your mitigation strategy look like? And when you start to add all that up, you start to see you're at a lot of the mercy of a public cloud provider for a lot of that information. So when it comes to cybersecurity, yes, we have our own, Fortinet infrastructure. We can give you as much security as you would need. The likelihood of we, under attack and it, has an effect on your particular load is less likely, right? So to answer your question, number one, we're more reliable and we're more secure, and you're going to have greater access and control.
Okay, excellent. Well, I know another, and you've touched on it a couple of times, but I know another hot topic for you is healthcare. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, because I think this applies to more sectors than just healthcare, but I know one of your topics is the digital transformation that's happening in the healthcare industry right now. So maybe you can tell me a little bit more about that, and what problems does using a private cloud like yourself solve for the healthcare community in general, or your healthcare customers?
I can say that proudly in one word that a lot of your listeners will understand. It's called latency. As we get further and further along the course of new technology and emerging technologies, you're going to need more real-time access to compute and also storage, because it's happening simultaneously. So we become an edge data center for a lot of our clients. Right? So they have that.
What does it mean, edge? I mean, I think I know what that is, but I just want to make sure all our listeners are on the same page.
Edge really means how close you are to the load. Edge means, so if you're running the state, for instance, if it's just a autonomous vehicle, I'm just going to use that as an example.
Good example.
Well, an autonomous vehicle, it's getting its instructions, at the car level. But if the compute, meaning the actual signals, are far away, like in a cloud atmosphere or private or public cloud, the actual compute could be far away. So what does that do? You have latency, you have physics that come into play. When you're utilizing Volaco data center within your edge compute model, you have very low latency because we have our own fiber in the ground. So you're operating at layer 0. right? So you're not getting that latency. And this is what happens a lot. And that's just utilizing the car. You start looking at robotics, RPA, robotic process automation. You're going to need something that's very close to the edge for things to operate in real-time fashion. That's really it in a nutshell. As you start thinking, why would I want to do that? It's speed and it's communication that has to happen in a simultaneous manner.
Okay. And that's an interesting point, because I assume, again, beyond healthcare, there's other sectors that obviously need that low latency time. And it's also interesting that, and again, this is something we didn't talk about in kind of our pre-conversation, is I didn't realize you guys owned all your own black fiber. So that's critically important as well. It's just, you know, when I think of healthcare, one of my areas that I know quite a bit about is on the physical security, or on the video surveillance side of the world. And when you're talking, and that's currently a debate in my world of, you know, do you have on-prem servers? Do you have edge servers? Do you have local? Do you really want to keep all that storage and the bandwidth that's required to keep, you know, 50 to 5,000 video cameras up simultaneously and streaming, you know, to keep track of that? It's just massive amounts of data and massive amounts of bandwidth. And I'm sure, again, healthcare has that, but do you have other clients that have that similar challenge?
Oh, yeah. A lot of government entities utilize our facility because of that.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of three-letter entities are within the data center, right? And which is great, because, like you just said, it's bandwidth becomes key. And then the speed becomes key, and then the storage. All of that has to go somewhere, and it has to be able to be traversed in a real-time manner. So what does that look like? You see it right now. Like, sometimes you'll be in a video call, like me and you are on right now. Sometimes the other person, you can tell when they don't have the right latency, right?
Right.
The audio goes off. Well, that's just us talking. In a machine world, machine to machine world, that can become critical, you know, because it upsets the whole apple cart. The whole domino effect falls apart, and then you get that warbled type effect that happens. So you need an edge data center that has capabilities to give you laser-like activity and performance, and mission critical security functionality.
Nice. Good answer. You're making me think of a few other things that I'm going to have to ask you offline, because it'll go well beyond the scope of this call. But yeah, you made me think of a couple things there. So good to know. Anything else you can tell? And how do you pronounce the name of your data center again? I just want to make sure I say that correctly.
Volico, VOLICO, Volico Data Centers. You can go to volico.com. You see a lot of great information. You'll get information about our SOC. You're going to get information about our NOC. You'll get information about our IT managed services, which is big. This is one of the other key differentiators that we have in the data center world, is that we have a 24/7 managed service operation. What does that do? We have so many of our clients now that they just don't have the time. They don't have the staff to be able to maintain all these different facets of a technological environment or a technological platform. They need more hands. So we become an extension of your IT team. That's the best way to look at it. So we're managing, we're looking, we're seeking, we're seeing all the different alerts and what's going on. And then we inform you intelligently about what's going on and what needs to take place. That's something you're not going to get typically out of your normal public cloud data center. Or even if you look at your on-prem, do you have the time to really look at all the different facets that you're going to need in your on-prem data center as well? So who can you interject that's going to have a managed cost? Because cost is key. Can I predict? Do I understand what the cost is? And then I can manage it on a month-to-month going basis. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
That's good, because I guess, you know, in my practice as a virtual or as a fractional CIO, I've almost never, except in the rare case of video surveillance, I've almost never come up with a case study or a scenario or a use case where when a client would ask me, well, isn't it cheaper to be on-prem than in the cloud? I've never come up with an example of where that's the case, especially because especially now in 2023, when it's coming down to the human cost, and just finding people to be able to administer networks, to do, racking and stacking and plugging and playing and keeping up on the latest security challenges, or making sure your systems are patched on a regular basis. I'm always a cloud first kind of guy. But let me ask you a question there. If I'm going into a client, say, who today, small, we'll say small company, we'll say under a $50 million company, not quite a mom and pop, maybe a little bit bigger than that, but they have a closet that has their couple servers in their closet, and same thing, they want to get out of the hardware business. They don't want that stuff. They're worried about it. Maybe they're not in a great area down here in Florida. They have a decent line coming in from their ISP, but now I want to use your data center. What's the, simplistically, keep it simple, what's the process now if I'm the CIO in that organization, or I'm the director of technology in that organization? How do I say, hey, Grant, I want to move all these on-prem stuff to your place. What do I need to do?
That's a great question. We get that all the time. It's about, all right, I'm in a situation, what's my status quo? This is where I'm at. There's got to be an impending reason why you need to move and change. And typically what we find is because of an upgrade. I'm already going to have to upgrade my current infrastructure. It's aged, it's old, it's end of life. Something is causing me to now to have to start looking at either I'm going to keep everything on-prem, I'm going to start looking at the public cloud, or I start looking at co-location. So the quick and simple answer is, when you would look at co-location, number one, what you need an assessment. What are we going to keep? What do we look to keep? And then what is it costing you? Let's look at it from the financial model. What does it cost you to keep your data center the way it is right now? Right. And you start looking at all those costs. What you're typically going to find by moving into co-location is going to cost you a lot less, because you're not paying for all the power, all the mechanicals, all the air conditioning. You start looking at the fire suppression. You start looking at all the other things that it takes just to maintain the data center that you have. So you say, hey, if I reduce my footprint that I have now, move a lot of things that either aren't as mission critical. Some things like, you know what, I want to keep my hands on my baby. I like my baby close. Great. But you might have some other workloads that, yeah, I can see them over there. They're a teenager. They can kind of do things on their own. That's when you start looking, all right, we're going to put this particular rack of servers and compute into a colo. We come out and actually build out the plan from an IT point, as well as an IT standpoint, of how we're going to cut over the infrastructure, how we're going to move everything over. So it's about disruption. You want to limit as much disruption as possible. So we look at those windows, we look at what needs to take place, because again, we have our own network. We can stand up a duplicate site even within our center, or on-prem, that's going to work for you, right? And then we do the cutover, and then the migration, whether it's compute and storage and that type of thing. So it becomes as seamless as possible to you and your business. That's our pride and joy. Our data center was made by engineers. We understand that entire process of how do you set up your firewalls? What are your backups going to look like? What is the IP screens? How many IPs you're going to need? So we set all that up in advance of cutover. Then you start looking at, all right, how much do I really want to maintain in the data center on my on-prem? What am I going to maintain in my co-location data center at Valico? And then what do I want even as an IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service? So I don't need to own the servers themselves, or the storage array. I don't want to own that stuff anymore, right? I just want to utilize it. So then you set that up, but I still want the control, the accessibility, because when you get audited, again, in the compliance standpoint come out, and you're just in public cloud, who's going to help you when you're being audited by one of the big fours? What does that look like? So that's when people start to utilize Valico again for that cutover. And then, of course, here's another key thing. We're not telling you not to use public cloud. We're saying use what you need in public cloud. What do you need from an elasticity standpoint, as far as growth? What do you need from things that are just distributed over cloud networks anyway? What does your SaaS platforms look like? So now you have the three-pronged approach. You have your on-prem that you need to keep, you want to keep close, but you've reduced your footprint, you reduced your cost, you put the rest of your workloads into co-location, right? You have that working because you decided to do that. Or then also you make the choice of doing an IaaS model, and you might go completely IaaS if that's what you look like, especially in healthcare. Typically, that's what you want to do because you still want control or access to that layer 2 component.
Right.
And then but the things that you don't need in layer 2, you're not really that concerned about it. Then that's where you have connectivity into your public cloud.
Right.
Hopefully that answers that. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's always my other pitch for clients too, is the IaaS model is hardware, it's like buying a car. It's a losing game. It's, the second you drive it off the lot, it's worth half as much as it was, when you stepped onto the lot. And hardware and servers and SANs, it's all the same thing. You really want to own that stuff and depreciate it. Let's just, lease it. If you have the ability to lease it, just like you would a car, let somebody else worried about it, and then when it's time to recycle it, then you recycle it. So those are great reasons. So I think that was a great tease for our audience. I appreciate that. Again, today on my second pilot episode, my guest was Grant McGaugh. McGaugh. I got it right the first time. And Valico.
Data centers. That's
Valico.
right.
Where does Valico come from? What is that name?
Valico means speed, if I remember right, and it comes from in Israel.
Okay.
So it has something to do with speed. That's what I was told. And
okay.
I'm sticking with it.
All right. So if people want to get in touch with you, Grant or Valico, I'll copy paste some links in the YouTube video after we wrap up, but just tell people where they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So send me an email at gmcgaugh, that's GMCGAUGH @Valico, VOLICO.com. And you can go to our website at valico.com.
Excellent. So let me just put up our outro slide. So I want to thank everybody else for joining us today here on DABEL Tech Talks. I appreciate everybody tuning in and look for more upcoming episodes in the near future on both my YouTube as well as my LinkedIn channel. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate your time. Thank you again, Grant, for coming today. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome.